When I first saw Dune Part 1, I wasn't really sure how to feel about it, and quite frankly, I'm still not. It's a very technically well made and well presented movie. The world they craft in this movie looks and sounds great, and there definitely is a level of intrigue to the plot, but it's all at the service of not that much, at least within the context of this first part, since nearly the entire movie is just set up for a story that barely even begins within its runtime. That line, "This is only the beginning," is a pretty cliche way to end a part 1 of 2, but the ending of the first Dune is probably the most appropriate use of that line in any piece of media or writing ever. When you really think about it, the entire movie is basically a first act, with the battle scene at the very end, where a climax would normally go, being the inciting incident. Just to put that into perspective, imagine if the original Star Wars ended just after the stormtroopers murdered Luke's family, or if the Fellowship of the Ring ended just after Frodo was forced to flee the Shire, and then Samwise says this is only the beginning, cut to credits. That being said, the presentation did manage to keep it from being dull, and it was able to get me interested in seeing the next one when it came out. Dune Part 2 is pretty much an objective improvement over the first part, because all of that stuff that was good in execution in that previous movie is also done well in this movie, and now it's at the service of an actual story. I will say, though, that story it's at the service of does feel a little bit derivative. It's kind of funny that I just happened to watch Lawrence of Arabia for the first time only a few days before I went to see this, because as it turns out, the Dune movies, Part 2 especially, are essentially Lawrence of Arabia in a sci fi setting. They're both war epics about a foreigner being seen as a messiah figure to an oppressed local population. Lawrence of Arabia is set in the Middle East, while the setting of Dune is a fictional planet which is very heavily inspired by the Middle East. The main characters have very similar arcs where their intentions are pretty altruistic on paper, but they're clearly getting corrupted by power as the movie goes on. I will say that the Dune movies tell that story in a way that's not better per se, but certainly more palatable to most members of modern audiences, including myself, if I'm fully honest. Dune Part 2 is over an hour shorter than Lawrence of Arabia and much faster paced. This movie has been crazy well received. As of when I'm writing this, it's number 20 on the IMDb Top 250, number 21 on the Letterboxd Top 250, and I wouldn't be surprised if it sweeps all the tech awards at the next Oscars, just like the first movie did. Personally, I do find that hype to be a little extreme. While Dune Part 2 was definitely an improvement over the first part, I'd hardly say it's one of my favorites. However, it does still get me interested in seeing the third movie, whenever that comes out, and apparently that one's going to be a proper sequel rather than a Part 3.